key question is, what percentage of people who land on our website already understand what our product does? For Apple or Stripe or Nike or Adidas or Microsoft, that's 99 point something percent. For your startup, it's probably sub 5%, and that's a completely different game. The framework that I'd recommend is features, abilities, and benefits. So if you haven't done this already for your startup, like, do this now.
Welcome back to Horizons Pod, where I convince marketing leaders to spill their secrets for the rest of us. I'm your host, Nate Desmond, and today I'm excited to be sitting down with Alex Napier-Holland. Alex is a conversion copywriter and founder of Guerrilla Flow, who has been called the king of landing pages by Peter Levels because of the way he draws on his unique background in enterprise sales to create high-converting landing pages that drive revenue. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You spent 6 years in enterprise sales before switching to marketing, I believe at age 31. What direct insights from your sales experience led to your skill today in creating these very high converting landing pages?
Yeah, I mean, to back up slightly, I trained as a journalist originally. So I studied international relations, went into journalism, and I wanted to be a journalist. So I was always drawn to writing. My whole emphasis was writing very early on. And I think a lot of people have a lot of preconceptions about the journalism industry. You think you're going to be a war correspondent, lots of international travel, this kind of Indiana Jones type role. And then you actually get into it, and it's anywhere between boring and mundane, reporting on someone's 100th birthday, through to actually pretty kind of a stuff that you might expect in terms of being asked to report on stories you feel ethically uncomfortable with. So there's a whole bunch of things. I remember crap pay as well. So I ended up kind of falling into sales by accident. And there was an international aspect to business that I hadn't anticipated. My dad was in finance. I always saw business as being quite boring. And then I ended up falling into a international sales office for Commonwealth. It was very I had colleagues from around the world, from a lot of different African countries. We were selling advertising into Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and the whole having to learn how to sell into different cultures, having to understand, for example, Ghana and Nigeria are both West African countries, but they're quite culturally different. And there's a different style of sales that I would use for somebody in Ghana, typically versus Nigeria. Why is that? What are the cultural reasons for that? I found that stuff fascinating, understanding how to sell into different cultures. So that kind of lined up nicely with the international relations side of things. And I then moved more into the enterprise space, where we were looking a lot more at more consultative sales. So pitching, negotiating, and closing complex deals over 6 to 12 months sometimes, where you're dealing with multi-stakeholder processes, where you've got the end user, but you have to get a large 6-figure deal past various blockers, people in IT, people in finance, and you have to sell it both at the end user level, but also at the strategic level, say to people in C-suite who aren't actually using a product, but it has to align with certain kind of objectives, be they. We were selling to universities at that time. So if you can prove that your software is aligned with a certain high-level strategic objective, suddenly pots of money get made available. So when I moved into the copywriting space at 31, I basically essentially just wanted to travel more. I wanted more freedom, and I quit my job, moved to Australia, and switched from sales to marketing, and went from a very senior sales position down to a junior marketing position, but then quickly ranked up because of a sales background, and then moved to Bali, set up my business. And I'd say at the early stage of copywriting, I didn't get to flex the enterprise skills as much. But then when I ranked up and started working with bigger corporates, I got to use that background. And now if you're looking at doing a website homepage, if you're doing a complex website, and particularly for an enterprise product, having that understanding of the sales process for that product, who is the website actually designed for? How do we, within that website, mitigate any technical, any financial objections that might be there? How do we communicate with C-suite too? So that anybody else who looks at that website, either on the homepage or on a page dedicated to them, finds a page that either sells to them or mitigates any worries they have. So I think that ability to map out the sales process for a complex high-level enterprise product, understand the different concerns and worries, and also the different culture that each of those departments has, and be able to talk to those is pretty handy. I'm not saying you can't do it if you don't have an enterprise sales background, but it's definitely useful.
And that is a fascinating use case for a landing page that it makes sense for certain things like one-time purchases, consumer purchases, that the landing page is the thing that closes the sale. But for something where you're doing enterprise sales, you have multiple different stakeholders who have different goals, and it's over a 6 to 12 month time horizon. What role does, let's say, the website homepage play in that sale?
Yeah, first thing is, I think you're probably the first person I've ever spoken to on a podcast who understands the difference between a homepage and a landing page. Most people don't. This is quite a topic at the moment. So I don't actually write landing pages ever, but I call myself a landing page copywriter because people keep coming to me and saying, can I have a landing page? And I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, the front page of our website. I'm like, well, that's a homepage. So I call myself a landing page copywriter, but then I ended up, getting a lot of, because I do a lot of teaching now as well. And I've got like a Figma pack that I sell. So I'm shifting into the teaching space. And I've realized it's just causing a whole load of problems when I keep that terminology there. So for anybody listening, if I'm running a paid traffic campaign, let's say Google AdWords or Facebook, PPC, whatever, Google PPC, Facebook ads, then you want to point those to a dedicated sales page, which would be a bit of a pitch. A landing page is technically just a page, like a squeeze page. It captures an email address. The point of all of this is it's very conversion focused. It's shamelessly conversion focused. We might get to a place in a mature business and a mature operation where you have a cluster of landing pages by audience and by use case. You multiply those together, you get a big number. And each of those has its own dedicated sales page that gives them a complete pitch and maybe asks them to buy the product, or a landing page, which captures their email details. But the difference is with a website homepage is the primary goal of a website homepage is not conversion, it's education. People land at a homepage at a variety of different points in a user journey. Some of those people are looking to buy your product, and it's important that they can do that easily. But you also have to accommodate a large number of people who don't know who you are, they're not ready to buy yet, and they just need to be walked through. It's like going to look around a car showroom. If you drop into a BMW showroom, they want to give you, a nice glass of water, a coffee. They want to walk you around the cars, but you don't hard sell people because that puts people off going to a BMW showroom. You want to have that freedom to look around the car, take it for a test drive. So the homepage is a balancing act because it needs to talk to people at multiple places in a journey. And also as well, you've got different audience personas, you have different use cases, and you might want to funnel those people from a homepage into a dedicated page that talks to that specific audience persona or use case. So a homepage is a series of compromises, and that is why you should never run paid traffic campaigns to your homepage. Nonetheless, lots of people do.
That is super detailed and very, very reasonable. It is interesting, even for myself. I think there's a temptation to send people to the homepage, for instance, for my podcast, just because it's easy. But you're so right that the reality is you're going to have much better results if you make a dedicated landing page for that sort of thing. You did a really good live review recently of homepages that did not work well and how you would redesign them. And one piece that stood out to me was the tagline was, I think, transform your time management with AI. And you explained how that was a terrible tagline for a homepage. Can you walk us through what would a better tagline look like for a page that is so general purpose?
Yeah, so that was a little workshop we did with Reloom, which is an AI website builder, and we did a live. Here is a website generated by AI, and I'm going to roast it. Essentially, what was it? It was transformative time management of AI. So the first thing I'd say is that AI is not a differentiator. My girlfriend is a designer, and we went shopping the other day, and I said to her, to prove a point, I guarantee you I can find a product in this supermarket that uses AI. You can buy an electric toothbrush with AI. You could buy a razor with AI now. Like, it's an absolute joke. Like, I would be surprised if you launched a software product in the year 2025 that does not have AI. Like, that would actually impress me. Putting AI, it's a feature, and it's not in any way a differentiating feature. Like, that does not belong in a headline at all. And if you were going to put it there, I'd want to understand what the AI did. Transform as well is so what I do is I write what I call placeholder headlines. I might write down on my first go, transform your time management. But then I want to go back, and it's like taking a chunk of wood and whittling it down into a human form and then adding details. Transform is like a raw chunk of wood. And then I want to sit down and say, what does transform really mean for my audience? and for people I'm talking to. And I think the important point here for people to take away is differentiation. So I think I was looking for, I've got two offices. I've normally got it to hand. I've normally got my 0 to 1 I hold up, because I think that I love that book, but that book has done that book has done marketing no favors at all in SaaS and startups. I think 0 to 1 is a great book for chances that your business is a 0 to 1 or 0, or like point zero 0.01. Particularly with AI at the moment now and the low bar to entry, you're competing in a hyper crowded marketplace. So I had one week where I had 3 different companies all had an AI chatbot an AI sales enablement chatbot reach out to me. They've all written their page as if no other product does this. And the example I always like to use is whenever you're writing this page, you have to bear in mind or imagine someone's got 5 or 10 tabs lined up for a product just like yours, and you have to give them reasons to close those tabs. So when I'm coming back to that headline, transformative time management, what I want to do as an exercise is say, what do most of the other apps on the market do right now? Why does that suck? What does that suck look like in terms of business impact? What does that suck feel like in terms of the emotions associated with that business impact? And what does my time management app do differently? There might be a percentage of people coming in onto your website who do not have a time management app, and you are selling to them going from a perspective of 0, you don't have a time management app, to 1. Vast majority of people who have a time management app, let's say Toggle, what is a primary problem of Toggle right now, for example? I want to understand that. I want to flesh it out and present my product as being the solution to that. So in terms of writing the actual headline, I don't want to get a gun to my head and write it on the spot, but that's a process I'd go through, is very much, what does your audience do right now? The status quo. Why does that suck? What does that look like? What does that feel like? How do we fix it? And what does a solution look like and feel like as well? And present that to them. We need to give people reasons when they have those 5 or 10 tabs lined up to close the other tabs and say, cool, I understand why those products suck. And I'm going to look at maybe just yours or maybe 2 or 3 instead.
And I love that thinking of how do I differentiate versus the competitors. I think you've mentioned specifically, well, just now you've mentioned that there's a need to not only say why my product is good, but also almost call out the other products and explain why they're bad. How have you seen companies do this well without being maybe offensive or countering some of their brand guidelines?
I've seen companies do it well and do it offensive. That's probably my favorite. But no, I mean, you don't have to. So we have what we call, for example, old way, new way is a popular way of doing it. I have a soft spot for calling out brands, but no, you could do old way, new way. So we have a hero section on a page. We then go into, for a startup, I always go straight into pain points and solution. The reason we do that versus, I've worked with a few design agencies who, there's many things wrong with the design industry, lots of things wrong. The main things wrong with the design industry is copying brands like Apple and Stripe, and not understanding that. Key question is, what percentage of people who land on our website already understand what our product does? For Apple or Stripe or Nike or Adidas or Microsoft, that's 99 point something percent. For your startup, it's probably sub 5%, and that's a completely different game. So we need a pain point section, first of all, to sort of demonstrate credibility, to show people why our product exists. We could do pain point solution, but to answer your question, one popular strategy is old way, new way, which is kind of the same thing, except instead of being horizontal, it's vertical like this. And you don't have to call out the brands individually. You could have, say, 3 pain points. Your current time management platform app has problem A, problem B, problem C. Switch to this product, and we have solution A, solution B, solution C as answers to those 3. So, we use the expression positioning, brand positioning. You don't have to name the other products. And in fact, actually, as well, if you've got 5 or 10 competitors, it's quite impractical to name all of those competitors. Whereas instead, if you could cluster your competition together into 1 or 2 or 3 buckets, you could say, what is the problem of those buckets? Let's say there is an architectural, let's say, for example, if you were Figma, and Figma don't have to say Adobe suck. Figma can say locally installed design apps suck. You could point to, you've got a locally installed design app. You have to keep bouncing files back and forth. You get another file, you open the wrong one. You don't know which has got the latest updates. You don't know what your colleagues are doing. You have to wait for them. Imagine if you were all working in the cloud. So I've basically just rained on Adobe's parade, and I've rained on the parade of a whole bunch of other companies without actually naming Adobe. So if you really make sense of the architectural or conceptual or philosophical problem of the industry and call that out, you don't have to mention the brand necessarily. And it's probably more powerful in some ways.
I find it fascinating that you mentioned this idea of don't talk about AI. That's a feature, not a thing that matters to your users. But you've also talked about the importance of not selling benefits, but rather taking a slightly different approach. How do you avoid talking about the features while also avoiding talking about the benefits? And what is the approach that people should take?
I think people should talk about features. I think they should a lot, but AI is not a differentiating feature. So what you'd want to do is drill down within AI, which is a broad church. What is your specific implementation of AI? So in the case of, if you're using generative AI, let's say again, let's say Figma installed some sort of a module that allowed you to generate really high conversion sales copy, which they can't. They're not allowed to because it would put me out of a job. But if that was possible, I would talk about AI generated conversion copy, or our conversion copy generator, for example. I'd have to play around with the language, talk about what it actually does. No, features are very important. So I think a lot of marketers now that I kind of hold in high regard talk about three things: features, abilities, and benefits. So we're told, if you log onto my LinkedIn profile, my LinkedIn cover photo is me on stage saying, sell with benefits is bull, which it is, complete bull. Like the worst thing in the industry is like outcome-based sales or benefit-based sales. So you log on to a website and it says get 237% more ROI or get 3 times as many sales. And I'm like, cool. Is that like a CRM? Is that sales enablement tool? Is that like a consulting company? I have no idea what your product does. And so the framework that I'd recommend is features, abilities, and benefits. So list your product. If you haven't done this already, if you're a startup, like do this now. List your key product features. And the next column lists the abilities they give your audience. Some people use the expression superpowers. I think that's needlessly cheesy, but whatever. And then in the third column, the benefits or the outcomes. So the abilities, the things that the feature enables you to do are typically the most interesting thing for a startup. Lead by telling people what your product enables them to do, then back it up with the features and describe the outcomes. Features are very important because features are how we build credibility. If I make a claim and tell you I can do something for you, the features are the short of social proof, at least, which is a great piece of evidence. The feature is a thing that describes and qualifies how I will do it. And then obviously the outcome afterwards, and it will enable you to grow your business faster or leave home on a Friday or that kind of thing. You need that framework, and you need all three of those things in your homepage, but lead with the abilities.
And now a word from our sponsor. It's me. I'm actually not taking any sponsors in season 1, but I just wanted to say thank you for listening. It's been such a joy recording these episodes, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I have. If you would like to support the podcast, the single most impactful thing you can do is leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening. This will help new people discover the podcast. And if you have someone in your life who's passionate about marketing, send this their way. They'll probably love diving into these insider tactics and stories. With that, back to the conversation. So if I were to take, let's say Riverside that we're using right now for recording this podcast, one feature they have is they transform your verbal podcast into a text-based video editor where I can edit by just like selecting a sentence and deleting it if it is a sentence I didn't want to keep in the final cut. So that'd be the feature. The ability is easily edit from text rather than being a professional video editor. And the ability is edit more quickly when I'm publishing a podcast. Is that a way to think about it?
Yeah, the ability would be, as you said, the capacity to edit more quickly. But then the outcome of that might be you could manage more clients, you could grow your agency faster, you could handle more bandwidth, you could make more money. If I just tell you, for example, you can handle more clients in your agency, I sound like every other BS marketer. But if I give you a very specific, I will enable you to increase your editing workflow. And I'm going, that's for the ability, increase the speed of your editing workflow because of this specific feature I have, which enables you to edit just using the text instead. Like there is a whole string of connections there that just feel credible. I clearly understand editing. I clearly know editing. And I understand particularly as well, if you've got this like pain associated with the editing process, I've tapped into that. And you both trust me, you believe me, and you also have this innate desire to have that pain solved as well.
That makes sense if I read, let's say, the whole homepage. But how do you boil that down into the attention grabbing headline?
So the headline, there's a few different tactics. There's a lot we could talk about there. It depends on the type of product, the type of sales process, the type of market in particular as well. But typically for the headline, what I'm looking to do is describe the ability in plain, simple English, describe what we enable people to do, who our product's for, what the ability is we give people, plus the audience that it's for in particular. I try and get that in the headline. If you simply describe what your product does and who it's for, people are going to stick around long enough to read at least the explainer section. The explainer section, I then go into more detail about what the product does and the audience, and I put in the outcomes. And then what I typically do, one of my favorite tactics is have 3 to 4 bullet points underneath that list key product features. I do this in the hero section, and I do it as well in some of the product walkthrough sections. If you shift the technical features into 3 or 4 bullets underneath, it frees up the paragraph to focus on more of a narrative. You know, we want to tell a story. We want the number one tip I have for anybody writing a homepage, which I put into all of my roasts, is we should be able to remove all of the paragraph copy and bullets, and the headlines alone tell a complete narrative. Because people skim read. Somebody lands on your page, they skim read, and somebody should be able to skim down your page in 10 seconds, 12 seconds. And just from those headlines, you get a complete pitch. So we don't want headlines like features and headlines like about us. Your about us should capture the ethos of your brand. Every single section, the headline should capture the content and vibe of that section. So you don't actually have to read the section. You could just read the headlines. The paragraph copy expands on my narrative, but I tend to shift as much of the technical copy, your technical features as I can into bullet points underneath. So then people can choose to read those or just skim past them if they're not that way inclined.
It's interesting how similar that is to some of the work I do as a marketing analyst. That I always tell people the same thing. When you're making a deck, the headline should tell the story. The label shouldn't be like sales. It should be, what are you trying to say about the sales? And then the rest of that slide should be supporting evidence. That if I want to understand more, or if I don't believe your headline, I can read the supporting evidence. I can look at the charts in the case of analysis to understand that better. But I so much agree the headline is what people will actually read. And so you should be telling your story there because that's where the people.
What you could do is to expand on that, something I love using are kickers. Some people call them kickers, eyebrows, the small piece of text above a headline that are really, really awesome tools. And what I like to use kickers for, there's a few use cases, I will put sales into them. So if we've got a headline, as you say, captures the overall value and proposition, the kicker is plain, simple English. You know, the whole game is about reducing the cognitive load required to make sense of a story. And if I've got a section for a particular feature, I will just write the feature in plain, simple English. Nothing creative at all is a kicker. And then the headline for that section can talk about the abilities that feature gives you. Another fun trick as well is because there's often this conflict between SEO and conversion. If an SEO consultant tells me to shove SEO keywords into my headlines, my response is not normally very polite. I always focus on conversion. I will never compromise conversion for SEO. But what we can do is put an SEO keyword into the kicker, but then people forget that style and SEO classes are separate. And we could have that small kicker set as an H2 or even an H1 SEO class. And then the headline underneath that section could be either plain text but big, or it could be an H2 as well, depending. So that's one of my favorite tricks. You don't have to have your style and your SEO classes combined. And in fact, you probably don't want that.
which is also just a great way of thinking about negotiations in general. So often we go head to head when actually there are ways to solve for both needs without compromising either one.
Yeah, but I mean, I actually I like arguing a lot. Like I'd say my best projects are what involve lots of healthy arguing. And you only actually come out with these solutions when you have a nice, healthy argument as well. If somebody just rolls over straight away, then you don't find a solution. Whereas when you actually butt heads a bit and you try and work it out, it's really nice. And you come up with something and you have this light bulb moment where you realize you can both have your cake and eat it. And that's cool. Another one as well on the SEO side of things is FAQs are great as well. So you get to the FAQ section at the bottom of your homepage. You have a whole string of SEO keywords that your SEO consultant wants you to put in that don't actually reflect necessarily serious search intent or don't reflect your conversion journey. I put those underneath in accordions. I never use accordions on a homepage because they have poor interaction rates. But you build those in underneath the bottom CTA, and you could load up 1,500 words of copy in there that's crawled by Google, but that nobody has to read if they don't want to.
That is brilliant. Okay, pivoting slightly, who is Jen Havis and how do you use her copywriting framework?
Jen Havis is great. She is awesome. She's helped improve the marketing industry a lot. She's also helped me and a lot of my friends make a lot more money. So I'm happy about that. Jen wrote a book, which is actually at this precise moment not in print. That may change, but it's called Finding the Right Message. And about, let's say I've been a copywriter for 8 years. I've been a conversion copywriter for 5 years. I would say the first 2 years, I would be ashamed to say I got away a lot without doing customer research. I think because I knew the industry pretty well. I would sort of talk to my clients, do a little bit of background research, and then just write. And about 3-4 years ago, a couple of high level copywriters, Joel Kletke, who is one of the best, my friend Rachel Pilcher, who is also one of the best, and they were like, "You've got to get Jen Havis's book, Finding the Right Message." That book made me $4,000 the first weekend I read it. I had 2 quotes sitting on my proverbial out tray ready to send out. And she walks you through this framework for customer research that I basically, after this book, I put on two customer research processes for like 2K each. They're more than that now. Uh, and closed both those deals the following week. So that book paid for itself many, many, many times over the first weekend I had it. She basically walks us through a framework of there's a lot to unpack, but it's essentially 6 questions which you can ask your customers, which you should ask your customers if you're involved in any area of marketing, sales, products in particular, which are pain point. You know, what was a particular pain point that led you to try out our product or to explore it? Use cases or solution use cases. What are the specific use cases that you expect our product to perform for you? Hesitations. Were there any worries that you had ahead of trying our product out? Awareness. What other products and solutions do you compare us against? Differentiators. So what were the reasons that you chose our product? And finally, a success. What does life look like with our product in it? And to walk through each of those in slightly more detail. So the pain points section, that's probably the most obvious and self-explanatory. If we understand the pain points that our customers came to us with, we can use that for our pain point section on the website. I typically use a structure with 3 pain points, 3 sub pain points, 1 macro pain point. And what I typically do is you have to bear in mind our competition are often not SaaS companies. They are or direct competitors. Our main competition is Google Sheets and WhatsApp. So there's people who are using a competitive product and are already spending money. We want to get that money. And there's a whole bunch of people who aren't spending any money. We need to convince them to spend money. So if I've got 3 pain points, the first pain point A is addressed that you don't have any kind of solution at all and you need a solution and that sucks. Pain points B and C are typically the ones where you've got a solution, but it's there's a problem with it and this is what it looks like. And then the macro, the H2 headline describes that collective problem. So we then move on to use cases, and you'd be surprised how often I've got 2 friends of mine who are solo founders in the sort of 500,000 to million a year range at the moment, who have both gone and done their own customer interviews and found out that the use cases that were popular with customers was slightly different to the ones they expected. And in both cases, they've actually shifted their product roadmap accordingly. Customers love your product, but they don't actually love it for reasons that you think they do. We then have hesitations. So that leads into a classic area of salesmanship, which is risk mitigation. If you understand that customers were worried about cost, they were worried about migration, they were worried about the user interface, they were worried about your compliance with GDPR, they were worried about your compliance with various pieces of financial legislation, both in America and the EU, which are different in both cases. They were worried about data security, for which there is a ton of different fragmented standards depending on where you are in the world. If you understand those popular worries, you can mitigate those in your homepage copy and reassure customers throughout the journey. We then have awareness. So if you're aware of the particular products that your customers are using and evaluating you against, you can build that into your marketing more as well. Differentiators is an absolute gift for angles. So what are the reasons you chose our product over competition? They're literally just writing a sales pitch for you. Super valuable, loads of angles you can pull out. And finally, success. That's your social proof. You might get social proof in the other categories as well. But the success ones, we get wins there. I mean, my favorite examples of wins, no one really cares about B2B. No one cares about ROI. People care about their families. They care about their fitness and their health and their lifestyle. I work with one of North America's top real estate SaaS companies. And the situation varies. You've got 5 or 6 different real estate SaaS apps that are stitched together with crappy APIs. And you've got various issues in terms of data quality, in terms of duplication of processes. This company comes in, they give you one app, a desktop platform and a mobile app. And we speak to a bunch of their sales reps, and 2 or 3 of them came out with a similar statement along the lines of, I used to work all weekend and my partner got upset because I was working all weekend and I would miss key family events. Thanks to this product, I finish work early on a Friday and I take the kids camping all weekend and I check the mobile app twice. Like, there is no business metric on planet Earth that is a tenth as powerful as telling someone, if you use our app, you'll get your weekends back with your family.
Yeah. Go camping with your kids. That's a great B2B sales pitch. That's
Better than
incredible.
any business No,
Yeah.
people work to look after and support their families. You're talking to them about ROI and about conversions. They want more time with their family and more resources in terms of money and time and energy to spend with their family. Talk to that.
And this builds really well into something you've mentioned before, which is having social proof above the fold on a homepage. How have you seen this done best?
There's a few things to unpack there. So the first thing I'd say is I hate customer walls of love. I absolutely hate. They're like the worst. They're like the laziest way to use social proof. It's just lazy. Like, you don't want to. Social proof is, as a marketer, if you work in a marketing department of a company, if you don't have a spreadsheet of really carefully, lovingly organized and tagged customer quotes, like, sort that out. Like, that's like you're like your Fort Knox. That's your, like, your literally your gold bullion is that spreadsheet of, really well organized customer quotes that are short and punchy and are tagged up against the particular types of audience, use case, problem, sector. So whenever you do any marketing activities, you can drop in a perfect, punchy, polished quote, and obviously actively collect those from your audience as well. And the work for projects that I've done, the correlation between projects where I have a bank of those quotes and making lots of money is big. It's really big. And to answer your question, we bear in mind this is a really valuable commodity. Stuff is like gold dust. We're not just going to dump this in one place on a page. And the cognitive load required to go and plow through all of these quotes in one place and find the quote that applies to you and your specific use case is huge. It's people just read one of them and glaze over. So the way I use customer quotes is I drip them throughout the page. My favorite technique is to make a bold or outrageous claim about the impact that particular feature for that section has on people's lives at the level where people are almost like, yeah, that sounds like BS. And then immediately underneath, you have a quote from a customer saying how you gave that. And if you can continually stretch someone's imagination and make them slightly doubt you, and then back up and prove with a customer quote you deliver that, you start to really, I'm trying to think of the right words, but it has like a real impact on how someone notices and sees your brand as well. Like you really stand out when you do that. So, but what I like to do for the hero section is, I mean, conversion rate optimization is, I'm not a big fan of like CRO hacks. Like you have CRO principles and you can't say that they will always work in every single case. But getting in a powerful social proof quote above a fold is one of the most consistently tested principles. For one, I want at the hero section as close as possible to the top. It's going to speak to the overall value proposition of the product, the impact it has on people's lives. It tends to be quite an emotional one. It won't be a technical one. It'll be more sort of the life before and after, the impact you've had on that person's life. Get in a photo of them as well. Uh, some of social proof quotes with a photo look more credible as well. They feel more real. And then after that, like I said, just sprinkle them throughout the page. Try and pair them up against each section headline. So if a section, I've got a page I've just finished now. The section headline for a particular feature says, we've gained X more productivity. And I hate using those kind of metrics in isolation. What we have is a customer quote underneath saying, using this product gave me 40x more productivity. I only like using those kind of numbers only work if you've got a customer testimonial to back them up. Otherwise, they just sound bogus.
You've mentioned cognitive load a few different times. How does cognitive load show up in how you think about designing a homepage or a landing page?
Yeah, so the first thing we've already covered, which is the need for somebody to be able to skim read the page and get a complete narrative from the headlines alone. That would be the main thing I would say. Having consistency in terms of, we talked about kickers earlier, kickers and headlines. If you're using your kickers in a certain manner, being consistent, it's amazing how the human brain has this ability to recognize a pattern and then stick with that pattern. And if you, first of all, look at the way that other websites tend to work, there are some bad websites out there, but if we have established UX principles, stick with those UX principles. It's amazing how many designers, there's some designers that are just not very good at UX and they try to break principles. Kickers, for example, putting plain English description of what the section we're looking at talks about is a great way to reduce the cognitive load. I'm reading the headline, trying to work out what it's saying. If I know it's for a specific feature, like the, note taking, take notes, you could just have the kicker being take notes. They then describe the way in which our note taking feature changes the game and is better than the competitions. If I've just got take notes in the kicker, it's that much quicker for my brain to make sense of it. Thinking as well about, one of my favorite tricks. I like thinking a lot about contrast. So there's this overlap between copy and design that is very poorly navigated. And I think that lots of good things lie in that crossover. For example, which sections of a copy, if you have a paragraph of text, which should be wrapped to say 8 to 10 words max, who decides which of those words are going to be highlighted in a contrast color? I would argue the copywriter should. I work in Figma, so I can do that. If you go to Apple's website, and in particular, if you look at the way that Apple sells technical products like the MacBook Pro and the Mac Pro, it's very different to the way they sell the iPad and the iPhone. Consumer products for a wide audience versus technical products that have a very high price point for professional creators that are often bought using a business card, for which the dollar value, $3, $4, $5,000 is often offset by perceived ROI for a business. I'm not buying a $5,000 MacBook. I'm paying $5,000 to access a deeper level of productivity, which is far more than $5,000 versus, you go and buy a dumb baseball cap like this. That's just a loss, right? That's not so you look at the way that Apple uses copy in particularly the technical pages. They'll have a slab of copy that discusses a feature using technical language. And let's say it's on a black background. That copy is in a light gray. So it's easy to read. It's high enough contrast. But they'll go through and pick out a line that describes the value of that feature and the impact on people's lives in white. Or if you're in a white background, again, gray copy and black is high contrast. So you're able to skim through this page that Apple's written, where you've got these slabs of copy that go into detail about how many nits the screen is, how many teraflops this. But there's a line that says blazing fast blazing fast video conversion times, 3 times faster renders, for example. Those we picked out in a high contrast color so that you can skim through, you quickly understand the value of that slab of text. And if you're a business user, you can think, cool, I buy that and I keep skimming. Or if you're a technical person, you can say, cool, I want to read that. So it's always making it easy whenever we've got technical language on a homepage. I always want to make it easy for someone to understand the value proposition of that technical language in the headline, be it an H2 or an H3 headline, and the highlighted text. And then reading the technical copy is optional. You never have to do it.
Almost like a choose your own adventure, but there are multiple levels of that adventure. I can skim everything, I can skim a bit deeper, and regardless of how I do it, I always get the full story because of how you've done this visual hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, we're not writing books here. This is not Lord of the Rings. Like, no one reads a homepage from top to bottom. Like no one has ever done that ever. People skim through, they see stuff they like, and then they engage that's interesting, and they go through and pick up bits that are interesting, or they skim through and feel confused and close the tab and go and buy your competitor's product. So it's all about making it as easy to skim read as possible.
And let's say you build an absolutely incredible homepage. When should you refresh that homepage?
That's like, this is good. You're asking good questions. This is like the $1 million question. Um, I would say in an ideal world, pretty much constantly, that would necessitate having an ongoing, there's a huge amount to unpack here. You should be talking to your customers constantly and as often as possible. You might talk to your customers on a quarterly basis. I think that's quite healthy. I would actually like to get to a cadence where we're talking almost constantly and the insights being produced or updated on like a weekly or bi-weekly basis. You could be tweaking and testing that copy every single week potentially, but I would say at least quarterly. But the reality is that I've worked with more than 100 startups, and I've got a lot of friends of mine, high-level copywriters, who have worked on similar numbers. And between us, the overwhelming majority, probably more than 90% of the brands we work with, leave their copy for 12 months or longer and treat it as a transaction. And when you look at software development, like, this is the crazy thing to me, is we've moved away from waterfall development processes to agile, and they're building their software on the basis of constant iteration and testing. Then they look at their marketing and they basically do like an old school waterfall process and just dump a load of cash into it and leave it there for a year or two, then come back to it. So yeah, it should be ongoing. It should be iterative. And I'm actually happy to say just this week, I've taken on a new role. So half of my time is now taken up with a pretty exciting startup in a new, what I call brand messaging architect. I'm basically in charge of our brand messaging. So we are going to be working together continually developing and testing new pages, publishing new pages, tests, constantly updating them. And this is my hypothesis that we're going to create a lot of value. I want to turn this into a case study and try and push the industry towards building in ongoing conversion copy and testing into a typical marketing workflow. We need to get away from this sort of transactional way that copy is being done across most of the industry.
You mentioned talking to customers as being essential to all of this. How do you do that? How do you functionally talk to customers? What are the best ways? What are the ways that don't work so well?
You've got two main ways, one of which is surveys, the other of which is interviews. Surveys are better for volume, interviews are better for depth. So um, it's kind of funny how much things have changed. So when Jennifer Havis's book came out, and this is no discredit to Jennifer at all. This is just the nature of reality. 3 years ago when I got that book, you go through the whole process of running the survey, let's say using Google Forms or Typeform, doesn't matter. And then there's a bit where you have to go through and do the word counts. And she says, you're not going to enjoy this. It kind of sucks, but you've got to do it. And obviously just a year later after I read that book, AI came out, and that's changed everything. So there used to be a cap on surveys for how many of them can I actually read, that cap is gone. So you could now survey, you could survey thousands and thousands of people. I still think you should skim through those surveys by hand and get a feel before you do the AI, get a feel for what's being said and go through. And AI is still not very good at going through and picking out customer quotes. I might use AI to identify potential customer quotes, find me areas of a copy that relate to this particular word, but you have to pick those out by hand and polish them. But yeah, customer surveys are great for volume. If you've got, let's say, a self-serve app and you've got thousands of customers, I'd use surveys. You can maybe pick out a small number of customers for interviews. And the key point is you want to interview customers for the more of the customers you want. Don't get intel from the kind of customers you're sick of dealing with. That doesn't make any sense. The kind of customers that pay you lots of money and disappear and don't give you any hassle, talk to them because you want more of them. At the interviews, you tend to get more depth and you can ask follow-ups. People just give you much longer answers. I don't personally use any incentives. Stripe reached out to me a few weeks ago and were like, do you want to talk to us about our new feature we've added to enable you to report from multiple channels in one place? And I was happy to speak to them for free because I value Stripe as a product. It's made my life a lot better. And the idea that I can have some impact on it's pretty cool. They then offered me $150. And I was like, okay, sweet, I'll take it. But I'd have spoken to them for free anyway. And if you frame it as a product feedback exercise, we're really happy you're a customer for our business. We really value you and would love to get your feedback and hear about what's working for you and what isn't. This is your opportunity to shape our product into the future. You're going to get pretty good hit rates from that. Much better than if you say to people, we're trying to make a kick-ass website to make loads of money. Can you give us some quotes? And that doesn't tend to go down so well. So yeah, so those are two things. Actually, a third option as well, which is pretty handy if you don't have too many customers, is competitor review scraping. So review scraping, how do you scrape reviews? I could tell you how to do it right now. By August, that technique will no longer work. Last time I told people how to do it was using a Python script, and then Cloudflare updated. They added a new feature for block scraping. And so Google how to scrape G2 reviews. There'll be a new way around it. I hope G2 never hire me. They won't like that. And like, let's say, for example, you're working on a survey platform, your biggest customers there are going to be like, SurveyMonkey. Go and scrape 4,000 reviews for SurveyMonkey. One of the questions for G2 is, what do you dislike about this product? Sweet. Thousands and thousands of people have told you why SurveyMonkey sucks. So you scrape that. You look for what are ask ChatGPT or whatever AI app you use. What are the themes here? Can you rank them? What are the keywords that customers use? Can you rank them? And ask it to remove, generic words. And you just get a whole bunch of angles there that you can target for things that piss people off about the industry's biggest tools. That's a great technique if you're an indie hacker and you're trying to play against this giant company. Just scrape reviews from Google, G2, Capterra. People are telling you why those products suck. Listen to them, organize that data, and use that to find angles.
That is magnificent. And coming back to those interviews, two-part question here. Number one, what sorts of questions do you ask when you're interviewing a customer? And then number two, how do you identify good customer quotes that you want to use on your homepage?
I ask 6 questions I mentioned earlier from Jennifer. I ask those 6. And then often when I'm talking to my customers, they'll often ask me they'll say, can we also get in as well a couple of specific questions around, maybe they've got a particular product feature that they've recently rolled out. They want to get feedback on that. So we'll typically squeeze a few of those in. I mean, there's a bit of a conversation point here about I get hired sometimes by companies and I am hired by the marketing team. And I'm like, cool, we need to do customer interviews. And they're like, oh yeah, that sounds good. They come back to us and like, oh, we just heard from the customer success team who said, or the product team, a lot of the time, the product team, they ran a survey like 2 months ago and we can't survey the customers now because we've got they'll get survey fatigue. I'm like, right. So you had no idea this survey was taking place. No. Right. So all of these different departments in the company, product, customer service, marketing, maybe even sales, are running their own independent, siloed, completely detached survey processes. And obviously what they should do is get together as a company and say, what is the intel each of our departments needs? can we pull together a particular survey or question or survey or set of interview questions that maybe doesn't cover every single base for every department, but gets enough of us that intel, run that centrally, and make sure every single person in the company, from the CEO down to the janitor, sees these. When this data comes out, every single person in every department of a company from top to bottom sees this data, because it's really important for the entire team. To this day, I mean, I've worked with multi-billion dollar brands. The best marketing team I've ever worked with is 3 physiotherapists. It's one of my friends. They have no background in marketing at all. They went to physiotherapy school. They started a mailing list, and they started reading the latest clinical research papers, which are dry and technical and boring, and finding what is the actionable takeaway here? What is the specific move I can use for someone who's got a busted ACL? And they would did a mailing list saying, these are the latest studies, these are the takeaways. This mailing list goes viral. They create a paywall version. They start making loads of money. They launch a SaaS. The SaaS was like an education platform, which is basically videos with some of the world's top physiotherapists, 30 minutes, and you get all of the actionable, here's how to use this latest breakthrough treatment in your physiotherapy. They've got accreditation by like all of the physiotherapy governing bodies in America and Europe. These guys are, I can't share metrics, but they are doing incredibly well. And I said to them, when I first worked with them, can we talk about customer research? And they just send over this PDF of beautifully organized every single quarter, 4 times a year. They mail out to their mailing list of hundreds of thousands of people who get the free newsletter, plus a whole load of people, many, many thousands, who pay for their platform, a survey asking about the biggest frustrations in their career as physiotherapists right now, asking, and then, what those look like. And then obviously for the people who are using their product, pros and cons about their experiences of a product. And they publish it all, and they use this to inform, because it's a small team. This goes into their marketing, it goes into their product development, it goes into their sales process. And I talk to multi-billion dollar companies that have got no idea what their customers actually care about, because they stopped talking to them like 5 years ago. It's mind blowing.
That really is. And that's quite inspiring of what is possible. And it's not complicated. Like I could imagine doing this in 2 hours, sit down with AI, map out a survey, and it's good enough to be much better than doing nothing.
I would say if you're a small bootstrap team, your single biggest competitive advantage is to talk to your customers regularly. And, whether that's running surveys regularly, whether that's, the CEO of the company potentially, or head of product regularly taking calls, jumping on calls, taking turns to sit on customer calls. With the company I'm working with at the moment, for example, I've not publicly mentioned their name yet, but I will do fairly soon. We want to build up a product more. They've just done a raise. CEO is a super impressive guy. He's on calls with like individual students trying out the product at the moment. Like, there's a certain point at which that will get handed down to somebody beneath him. But at the moment, we're just all going to be jumping on loads of calls.
There's so much alpha in doing that and finding what no one else is finding because they're not willing to talk to these people. I wanted to pivot from this like smaller, more nimble company to a much bigger sales cycle. You mentioned at the very beginning of this session the challenge of a homepage when you have multiple different stakeholders who have very different needs and desires. Let's say I'm selling to a major enterprise, and you've talked before about how maybe the C-level suite is thinking more about internal alignment, whereas the actual end user is thinking about usability. How do you address divergent concerns on a single homepage?
I take it as a given that you're typically talking to your end user most of the time. I've heard a few marketers that I respect say you always talk to your end user. That's not true. I recently worked with a Berlin-based supply chain digitization platform. And in our case, we are selling to C-suite. We are selling the product to people who will never actually use it. They will never touch the interface. They will never use a dashboard. That's interesting. That is rare though. The vast majority of the time we are talking to the end user. I would always address the end user primarily, and I would deal with C-suite and finance. So C-suite, you've got the end user as a person who's using it. C-suite are the people who are probably going to sign off from a budget. So I need to understand how it's aligned with their strategic objectives over a 3 to 5 to 6 year period. And then, IT and finance, what we call blockers. They're looking for reasons to say no. So I address the end user directly, typically, to answer your question,
Fair.
there's a rare occasion where I sell directly to C-suite, but most of the time we address the end user and the others are secondary. In terms of talking to different audiences, one of the key things to consider is you might have 5 different audiences. Do they have a different user journey? If those 5 different audiences all log into the platform and they go through similar, I like to walk people through typically 4 to 5 steps. And the first step is, depending on the product, it's usually how easy it is to get started. So how easy it is to migrate over. It could be a self-serve product, just get started, get loaded up. I sometimes fold in, if it's a really easy self-serve product, I sometimes don't even dedicate a section to that. But definitely if it's an enterprisey type product, I want a section talking about how easy it is to get onboarded. They're going to talk to an account manager. And then 2 to 3 sections, depending, of key feature buckets, feature bucket A, feature bucket B, feature bucket C, primary use cases there. And then what I like to do is wrap up with either 1 to 2 sections of outcomes, describing the future. So what I might do for an enterprise is break that into 2 sections, tactical and strategic. So tactical or managerial level would be now, because we've got features A, B, and C. Now, over the next 3 to 6 months, you're going to gain these tactical advantages. You can see what your sales team is doing. You can get more sales. You can run that particular department of a business more effectively. And then the final section for this big enterprise client is strategic. Now, over the next 2 to 3 years, you can scale your business faster. You can enter more markets. You can launch new products. If it's a smaller traditional B2B, I'll typically just have one outcome based section there. But yeah, if it's enterprise, I break it up. So I map out that user journey of 4 to 5 points. And if we have 5 audiences and they all have a kind of similar journey, then I can have that same homepage tackling it. And then underneath at the bottom, I might break out, I have my call to action. And then underneath that, I might have a section saying, here are the benefits of different audiences. The problem is when we have a product where we're selling to 5 audiences that have a very different journey and a very different interaction, they might be using different products. In that case, what I typically do, I've got my hero section, my pain points, my solution. And then immediately under that, sometimes I have a box where it's like, which of these audiences are you? Are you audience A, B, or C, or D or E? And I funnel them off early in the page straight to a dedicated user journey for them. So that's the kind of a key question is, do you have an agnostic user journey, or do we need to funnel people as quickly as possible to a specific user journey for them? This is where just writing copy is just not really enough. Someone says they write copy for B2B SaaS brands. It's like, you've got to understand the sales process. You have to break that down and understand how different the sales process and the onboarding and the customer journey is for different audience segments. And then understand enough about how websites work and behave to think, what's the correct structure for us to take this traffic from these sources, to funnel it to the right places, to not lose too many people on the way, and to maximize conversions. Like, that's complicated. There's a lot of intersection there between business, marketing, etc.
And speaking of intersection, what is it that marketers most often fail to understand about typography?
I'm not an expert at typography, but I'd say more formatting. I would say certainly, like having really tight paragraphs. Like, no one likes wide paragraphs. Wide paragraphs are horrible to read. Keep your paragraphs really tight. You can have centralized or left aligned or right aligned headlines. I occasionally use centralized paragraph copy if it's immediately underneath a headline for like a whole section header. For an explainer, I might do an explainer centralized, but any of the feature copy, I always have left aligned. On that right aligned. Again, a lot of this just goes into design, like understanding spacing is very important. Like, spacing is super, super important for text to make it easy to read. The thing I mentioned earlier as well, which often falls between the cracks, is understanding how to use contrast as a visual aid as well. So yeah, taking paragraphs for dense copy and using higher contrast to indicate benefits is quite handy. Beyond that, we get into more, what kind of fonts should we use? I mean, we're getting more into design territory there, I'd say. But I do feel there is a big gap between design and copy. I work exclusively in Figma. Haven't used Google Docs in 2 or 3 years now. And I mean, I've got my own Figma pack for homepages people might want to check out. It's got a lot of like drag and drop modules you can connect together to help you build a homepage quickly. But switching to Figma is the best thing I have ever done. I nearly quit copywriting because I was so sick and tired of fighting design teams. I still fight design teams, but now I do it inside Figma, so I win more of the time. I used to lose when I was in Google Docs, whereas now I have a good chance because we battle it out in Figma instead. So that's made my life a lot better.
Which is also just true of so many things in marketing. Go to where your customers are, go to where the battle is. Don't be fighting in a place where they're not even there. That brings
Yeah.
us to the end of the interview. But before we close, I've got a lightning round where I'll throw out some very quick questions. Feel free to give quick answers. You can give longer answers too, entirely up to you. First question is technical copy or emotional copy?
Russia.
Single long page or multiple targeted landing pages?
Multiple targeted landing pages.
Mobile first or desktop first design?
Mobile first, 100 times over.
Direct
The
response?
worst problem designers do, designers design for desktop way too much. Sorry. Yep.
I feel like I fall into that because I grew up on the desktop. And so I find the desktop more compelling myself. But you're right that the
So do
reality
I.
is most people are not loading your landing page or your homepage on the
Worst
desktop.
thing of a design industry is I've built this really cool, sexy thing on a 4K Apple 32-inch monitor. Can you please, fellow designer, look at this awesome, sexy website on a 4K Apple monitor? Oh gosh, it looks amazing. And then it gets loaded up on a $300 potato Android phone by a 60-year-old person who thinks all transitions are really confusing and dark mode means it must be broken, and they leave.
So true. Direct response or brand building?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good one. You've got to have both. Depends. It's like shifting gears on a. It's like asking me, do you want first gear or fifth gear on a bike? Like you need to shift gears.
Typography or color for creating visual hierarchy?
Gosh, that's really good. I mean, you've got to have both. If I had to choose one over the other, I would say probably typography, because if you don't have good typography, everything else is screwed anyway. I do love color for visual hierarchy. I really do. But if you don't have typography, everything else is wasted anyway.
Hero image or hero text?
Got to be text. Yeah, his copy is 80% of a page, and I know even my designer friends deep down they know that's the truth.
That brings us to the end of the interview. Where can people go to learn more about you and the work that you do?
So you can follow me on Twitter, Napier-Holland. I share quite a lot of marketing stuff, a few moans about the UK political system too, as well as warning. And you can also check out gorillaflow.com is my agency. Napier-Holland.com is more what I'm up to, which is predominantly marketing with a few other things as well. And you're welcome to connect me on LinkedIn as well, Alex Napier-Holland.
Fantastic. All of that will be linked down in the show notes below, as well as your Figma if anyone is interested in making better homepages. Thanks for coming on the
Thank
show.
you.
Appreciate having you here.
It's been great, Nate. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.